Hi, I am the king of this land. All you'll see is mine to command. I am a noble of this land. I, the king, I do serve, but all of my land do I command. Huh. Well, I'm a knight. And while serving my lord and running my land, I do follow the code of chivalry to give a sweet lady my hand. And whatever you do, do not harm those under my protection, or I shall run you through. I, I'm a peasant, and I work the land. I farm for the knights, and give him most my food. But I'm a peasant. What am I to do? Oh, whoa, dude. Like, I'm a serf, and, I can't, leave this land unless, the lords and the knights and, all those uppity dudes, give me permission. So, I have to stay here and, work this land, until they, let me not do this, man. You know what I'm saying, dude? Alright, so, that's a run through of, kind of some stages or some levels of classes during the uh, feudalist system, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. We're going to kick it off with the Holy Roman Empire. Right now we're focused on medieval Europe. In the 900s, Eastern Franks became Germany. Otto I sent troops to protect the Pope. Excuse me, protect the Pope. In 962, Pope John the 12th declares himself emperor of the Romans, thus beginning the Holy Roman Empire. Comprised mostly of Germany and northern Italy. Had very little power and remained divided in small kingdoms until the 1800s. And here you can see the Holy Roman Empire. You can see the papal estates here, which was previously mentioned. And you can see the little kingdoms inside of the Holy Roman Empire. And the kingdoms actually wielded a lot of power. The Holy Roman Emperor pretty much couldn't do anything without the kingdoms. So, the spread of Christianity. Pope Gregory I sent monks across Europe as missionaries. So, he sent them all, all throughout, into England, into France, into Ireland, into Italy, all over Europe. Sent them all over in every which direction, trying to spread Christianity. Most people in Western Europe became Catholic by 1050 AD. And monks offered many services. Monks weren't just there, and people, went to monasteries for things like if they needed food, uh, if they needed medical attention. The monks would know basic medical attention. If they just needed rest to get away and have a place of rest, or if they even needed a document copied, because remember, they didn't have the printing press back then. So to copy a book, uh, especially like the Bible, you would have to have someone write word for word what it was, and they had to write it very legible. And monks were the ones who did this. A lot of times, these books were written, or the Bibles were written by these monks. Um, and they began playing a role in the politics of a region. And like the four-leaf clover, and that's where Saint Patrick's was a missionary that was sent to. I have a little note of it up here. Was sent to Ireland in order to be a missionary there. God or king? Um, the dispute between Pope Gregory the Seventh and Henry the Fourth over who had more power. Uh, and he was part of the Holy Roman Empire. He was the Holy Roman Emperor. Um, the Pope unkinged him and said, "Hey, nope, you're no longer the king of the Holy Roman Empire." And, and he excommunicated Henry from the church, which means he banned him from the Catholic Church. And since he was banned from the church, he couldn't make it to heaven. Henry eventually winds up asking for forgiveness. The Pope forgives him, but to prove a point, crowns a new king. Henry said, "I ain't having this up in here." So he declared war on the Pope, said, "You going down, fool? Your pony had it all." Well, so Henry named a new Pope. He said, "Hey, this is going to be our new Pope." Well, then Henry was driven out of Rome. In 1122 AD, a new king and a new Pope came to an agreement. Uh, and this showed that the church was a political force to be heard. Okay, during this time period, the church laid out a lot of rules. They held people to it. The church was a huge part of the ruling that took place throughout the different kingdoms. And think the church was very powerful because it spread throughout all of Eastern Europe. So they had a bigger people, a bigger group of followers than each kingdom had. So you were wise to listen to the church. Feudalism. And we hear feudalism a lot, and sometimes you hear it referred to feudalistic Japan, and it was sort of similar over there, and we'll talk about that a little later on. But a new way of organizing society that spread across Europe. And the reason this happened was because Viking raids were hidden everywhere, and you never could predict where a Viking raid might hit. And so the kings couldn't protect everything. So they started dividing up power to the nobles. And the king would give these nobles land, they either had inherited the land, or they won the land through battle, or the king would grant them land for some heroic deed or something. Um, and the nobles, once removed, because the knights would be the ones who did the protecting, but would protect the people in return for their services, offering fighting or farming, kind of like we heard in that opening little skit. Uh, you know, your fighter, some of them would come up, and if you've ever seen like Braveheart or some of those movies, you see all those pretty much the people without armor that are showing up with like pitchforks or maybe a sword or the ones that don't have all the cool fighting gear. Those are a lot of your peasants who are called on to come fight, and they have to answer it because the nobles are calling on them, and they were given land in order to farm on and are promised the protection of these nobles if they do this fighting, and then they farm and give up their food. Um, and so you're divided into feudal territories. And these are small areas with castles at its center. It would have a castle. It started off as manors, and the manors were wooden houses, and they eventually developed into big stone castles with moats around them. So you had to, cross the bridge to get in, and usually there was some kind of village located near it. Nobles were both lords and vassals. They made an oath of loyalty publicly to a king. They would swear allegiance to the king. You can see here, uh, a vow of loyalty being taken. So these nobles would swear allegiance to the king, and they would have their land. And some of them had more land or more power really than the king, but the king was still at the top. And then under them, the vassals would have knights, and then under the knights would be peasants and so forth. And each one being vassals of the one above them. So the nobles were vassals of the kings, but they were lords of the knights and of the peasants and serfs. Uh, vassals fought in their lords' armies in return for land and permission to rule the people. The land was called a vassal's fief, or its fiefdom. Okay, fief is this word right here. Knights. Those were warriors who fought in armor. Okay, it was made possible by the invention of the stirrup. We don't think about, wow, how were they able to do this? The stirrup came out, and then people could, on armor, could then get on horses. But before that, if you're wearing all this armor, you couldn't get up on the horse. Um, and knights follow the rules of chivalry, kind of like the samurai's code of Bushido, or any of the things that are similar to like that. It's a code of honor. And these were rules followed by knights that included things like obey his lord. A knight had to obey his lord, whatever the command. He had to be brave. Respect women. That's why sometimes now they say chivalry's dead, and when the guy doesn't open the door or so forth, and is referring back to this. Honor the church. And that's how important the church was, that it was a part of chivalry. Help people. Be honest. And fight fairly. And these are all parts of the codes of chivalry. Serfs were peasants who worked the land. They could not leave, own property, or marry without permission. So pretty much the lords, their vassals, ruled them, and they couldn't do anything unless they were given permission. Uh, they could not be sold, but they were protected by their lords. They weren't slaves, but at the same time, they weren't free. And they could earn their freedom by working the land. And what would happen is they would work the land, they would keep enough to feed them and their family, and the rest would be given to the lords, to the knights, and the knights would give that to the lords, and the lords would give a portion to the kings, and that's how each would wind up getting fed. The upper echelon got fed. Um, Several advancements helped improve this. Improve farming. The horse collar, which allowed them to work the horses more. Wind and water powered mills. We think of that as ancient technology, but at this point, that was something that greatly helped out you know, to use this wind and water power. I mean, it was amazing. It made life a whole lot easier because remember, they had to do it other ways before that existed. And at last, into feudalism. After all, at the fall of Rome, Europe went into chaos and despair. Feudalism brought back order and safety. Everybody began to feel safe because they were protected by their lord, and the lord would protect them from these Viking raids, these bandits. Barter was the main form of trade until money slowly came back. Because remember, in Europe at this time, this is what we know as the Dark Ages. Okay, they kind of fell backwards. There were still some new inventions, like we mentioned, the stirrup and the horse collar and so forth. But they kind of fell backwards and forgot to do how to do a lot of the things that the Greeks and the Romans and so forth had created, and everybody went back to pretty much almost fending for themselves uh, and worrying about themselves. So, tune in next time when we find out more about medieval Europe. Until then, deuces!